joining me is no one. My normal cohort, John Buell, is actually out at the beach, catching some rays, having some wine and cheese, and doing all that normal stuff. He is having a great time, and I am sitting here in a house with no air conditioning. So, he wins, I lose. I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to break down this weekend's Dream card, a card that no one seems to really care about, almost like the last Dream card, but this one seems to be getting even less attention. And I think that's sad, because this is actually a pretty solid card, and I think even 2 years ago, this is the kind of card that would still be getting a lot of attention. So I'm going to break it down, and while I break it down, I'm going to try to, convince people that this is a card that they really should care about. Because I still don't think that this card is on HDNet. And I think if it's in the middle of the night, what are they going to show? Bikini Destinations? Some dude drinking a lot of beer? I don't really need to watch television to see either one of those things. So, HDNet, get your act together. Do what you got to do. I want Dream Live this weekend. In the first bout of the evening, Tatsuya Mizuno is going to take on Trevor Prangley, the Strikeforce veteran. Mizuno had a lot of hype after picking up that victory over Melvin Manoff. He's not really a fighter on this level. I think Prangley has deteriorated a lot with age, probably even a surprising amount considering he's not that old, but he's not the same fighter he was. With that being said, he still has enough to take out Mizuno. Mizuno will need to grapple and use his submission skills to pick up victories, and I just don't see him getting Prangley to the ground. Prangley throws a nice 1-2 on the feet. He's semi-technical. It should be more than enough to take a decision, probably even win a stoppage and move on. Maybe working his way up to a light heavyweight title shot in Dream. They don't have the deepest division, but then again, they don't put on a lot of events, so there you go. Next fight, Tatsuya Kawajiri taking on Drew Fickett. This was originally supposed to be Willemé Chikrem Freire. Drew Fickett stepped in on late notice, and in a lot of ways, this becomes a better fight. I think we saw that Freire could not really wrestle in his one UFC fight when he lost to Waylon Lowe, and Tatsuya Kawajiri is a strong wrestler. I think Fickett, with his little career resurgence, is a more interesting fight for Kawajiri. Obviously, after Fickett's last fight with Matt Veach, you have to favor Kawajiri. He's a better striker than Fickett, and he has the wrestling ability to control where the fight goes. So obviously, Kawajiri is still a big favorite. He's a top 10 fighter. Fickett's a guy still trying to fight his way back to the big show. At the same time, this is still an exciting fight, and this is the kind of fight that, HDNet should be happy to put on when they're putting on, Bobby Lashley, Eddie Sanchez, and that kind of stuff. Great fight coming up here. Next fight, Hayato Sakurai takes on Lithuanian Marius Zaromskis for the second time. Marius Zaromskis, the Dream welterweight champion, actually defeated Sakurai in the Dream welterweight tournament en route to winning the title. Sakurai struggled to make weight before the tournament and looked completely gassed out in the fight. Sakurai's an interesting guy. I think a lot of people have always attached the idea that he can beat anyone if he's in the mood, if he's right, if he's training correctly. I don't really know if that's true because he doesn't seem to be in the right mind and training correctly recently. Fights against Nick Diaz, Zaromskis, he's looked terrible, but at the same time he absolutely starched Shinya Aoki. So it's really tough to predict Sakurai. I think this is another fight that's interesting because Sakurai really needs to get back on track. He's the kind of guy who could be a star for Dream, and his just performances haven't shown. On the other hand, since making his Dream debut, Zaromskis has not lost in Japan and has not won outside of Japan. So here he is back on his home soil, place where he beats Sakuraba, place where he beats Sakurai, place where he beats Jason High, and maybe he'll be able to kickstart his career that was really slowed down after he made his Strikeforce debut and losing to Jordan Mean in Score Fighting Series. So an exciting welterweight fight. Interesting why it's not for the title, I don't understand. There's rumors that if Sakurai wins, he'd fight Sakuraba. I don't know if that's really a fight I want to see, but maybe that brings in some eyeballs. Next fight is Eiji Mitsuoka and Bruno Carvalho. This is not Bruno Carvalho, the judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. This is Bruno Carvalho, the kickboxer. He brings a lot of power, very good striker, and I think that is going to give Mitsuoka problems. However, Mitsuoka clearly the better grappler and should be able to do work on the ground against a fighter like Carvalho. Mitsuoka did get back to action at Deep 53 earlier this year when he took out an unknown South Korean fighter. Even though it wasn't against a quality opponent, I still think it was good that he got back in action and not some of the rust-off. Fighters who are out for more than 10 months really struggle, and he hadn't fought since November 2009. So I think after knocking some of the cobwebs away, he's going to be able to show off his superior grappling against Bruno Carvalho and pick up, a pretty solid victory and maybe establish himself in Dream, or even, pick up an opportunity to fight overseas. And we move on to what was supposed to be, I guess, the third place bout of the Japan Bantamweight Grand Prix. Atsushi Yamamoto chose not to fight, so Keisuke Fujiwara is going to step in to take on Kenji Osawa. And I think this is Osawa's fight to lose. Fujiwara is a zest fighter. He's good on the ground. He's kind of a submissions over positions kind of guy. He goes crazy. Osawa's a guy who really doesn't get as much credit as he deserves. He fought in the WEC. Looked pretty good in a couple of his fights in the WEC. He's just got submitted and eliminated from the tournament by Masakazu Imanari. Not really not a shame. Imanari submits a lot of people. Mike Thomas Brown, George Gurgel, and the list goes on and on and on. I think Osawa's going to be able to do a lot of work on the feet. I think he's going to be able to get takedowns and ground and pound. I think it's going to be a pretty impressive victory for the WEC veteran. Really getting into the meat of the card, the Bantamweight tournament finale, Masakazu Imanari is going to take on Hideo Tokoro. We talked about zest fighters. Tokuro's sort of from that background. He really has a zest fighting style where he's balls to the wall looking for submissions. He's wide open. He's looking for submission holds. He's rolling for knee bars. And I think, honestly, that plays into Imanari's game. I think if you attack a fighter like Imanari with a wide open submission style, he is going to be able to use his better submission tactics and more technical submission game to catch Tokoro in a leg lock. And I think that's going to be the story of the fight. With that being said, Tokoro is really struggling against guys who can find his chin and put punches on him, and I think that's obvious that that's not Imanari's game. Perhaps Tokoro tries that Chuck Liddell strategy of keeping the fight on the feet and trying to land punches. He has worked extensively on his boxing, he's just held back by his chin. So I think that's certainly his route to victory. However, I don't think he's going to be able to resist getting to a scramble with Imanari, and I think that Imanari is going to turn out to be the champion of the Japan Bantamweight Grand Prix. A pretty impressive victory for Imanari after he lost in deep. He didn't lose his title, but he lost to Iron Nakamura. So he really sort of turned it around and gotten back to the top after a little dip in his career. It'll be interesting if Dream stays around. They've been planning on having a World Bantamweight Grand Prix in which the first place winner, the second place winner, and the third place winner of the Japan Bantamweight Grand Prix would enter. So at least after this, we'll know three of the participants: Imanari, Tokoro, and either Osawa or Fujiwara. I think it's going to be Osawa. Also on the card is a light heavyweight championship bout. Former Strikeforce champion Gegard Mousasi taking on Olympic silver medalist in judo Hiroshi Izumi. And I think, again, this is an interesting fight. There's a little bit of a story here. Mousasi has really struggled with wrestlers in his career. He obviously lost the title to Muhammad King Mo Lawal, who is a great wrestler, placed in international tournaments, represented the United States in a couple world championships. And, Izumi is an Olympic-level judoka. A lot of people say, well, unless the person is a really good wrestler, they don't give Mousasi problems. Then Mousasi goes out and fights Keith Jardine and really struggles with a guy who had lost his way out of the UFC. I think it's obvious that Mousasi won against Jardine, but I don't think anyone would ever say that Jardine is a lights-out wrestler, and he got a lot of takedowns and tried to do a lot of offense on top. I don't think Izumi has much of a chance in this fight, but I would not be surprised if he got some takedowns. He already has the Olympic judo in his pocket, and he's worked extensively on his wrestling as well. He's wrestled in the All Japan Workers Tournament, which is a qualifier for the All Japan Championships, I believe they're called. So, he's putting the work in. He understands that wrestling is an important part of the MMA game. And I think that is the method to beat Mousasi. I don't think he has enough. Musasi's a better athlete. He's also very slick on his back. The up kicks that finished Jacare. He caught Dennis Kang in some submissions. And I think he's going to be able to win a fight even if he is stuck on his back. With that being said, on the feet, his advantage is huge. He can put serious punches on Izumi. And, in his short career, Izumi has shown that he can get sucked into a slugfest on the feet, even though that's not his game. So I think Mousasi is a big favorite, should be a big favorite, and will retain his dream light heavyweight title. Hopefully we can get him back in some more high-profile fights in Strikeforce in the near future. But once again, why not have a former Strikeforce champion on HDNet in the middle of the night? Is it going to be Art Man or Gegard Mousasi? I think that's an easy decision. Moving on in the main event, which will feature Dream Featherweight Champion Hiroyuki Takaya taking on Kazuyuki Miyata. I think a lot of people are not excited about this fight because Takaya had that loss in Strikeforce. He defeated Bibiano Fernandez for the Dream Featherweight title on New Year's Eve, and his hype was pretty much at a critical mass. He beat probably one of the best fighters he had ever faced, and in the process picked up a major featherweight title. Then he made his Strikeforce debut and lost to Robert Peralta on an undercard. Peralta, solid fighter. I don't think anyone expected Takaya to run over Peralta, but I don't think a lot of people were expecting a loss. He really isn't a featherweight. Takaya probably should be at bantamweight. Dream has their crazy divisions, which is probably how he ended up fighting a featherweight. Miyata is going to have a huge size advantage. He's a big guy. He was big for lightweight. He's even bigger for featherweight. And it's also interesting because I think Miyata is the type of guy who could work his way into the top 10 from Japan. A lot of people talk about how Japan's fighters are not doing well overseas. I don't see Miyata fighting overseas because he really has close ties to FEG. However, he's a strong wrestler. He's improved his striking. It's still not very good, but it's much improved. And his style really works for a Western style of MMA. Could you see him in a cage, running people into the cage, picking people up and slamming them? He's an Olympic wrestler. These are all very good things that he has going for him. I think he absolutely dominates Takaya with takedowns. Takaya is small, never much of a wrestler. And if he picks up this win, since returning in 2009, he beat two relatively unknown fighters in Deep. Then he returned to Dream, made his featherweight debut. He defeated DJ Taiki, Takafumi Utsuka, Takeshi Inoue, and Cole Uno. If he adds Hiroyuki Takaya to that mix, I mean, that's a pretty impressive string for a guy who was once known for getting knocked out by Kid Yamamoto in only 4 seconds. So, definitely a career resurgence. I think featherweight certainly is the place for him. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. This could be the birth of a guy that people are arguing about as belonging in the top 10 if he can get the opponents. I think a lot of the guys who fight exclusively for Dream really are hurt by the fact that the promotion is struggling. FEG has had trouble paying fighters. People are publicly bashing FEG. And this really hurts them because they're not able to get the opponents that they need to move up in the rankings. Someone like Tatsuya Kawajiri, he's a very impressive fighter. Even though he lost to Gilbert Melendez in Strikeforce, he needs to be fighting top 10 guys. We see that he can beat like the Jay-Z's of the world and the Josh Thompsons of the world, but he's fighting Drew Fickett on this card because they can't have a solid fighter come across the ocean to make the fight happen and get the fight to that level. I think that's going to hurt Miyata in his quest to become a top featherweight, but I don't think he's going to have any trouble claiming the Dream Featherweight Championship. And that does it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. I know it was a lot of me. Next week, we're going to have a real show. John Buell will be back, probably with a ridiculous tan, maybe just a wicked case of the white man sunburn. Anyway, Richard Mann, host of MMA Outsider Podcast, signing off. Talk to you next week.